During today's trial, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, a former guest on this broadcast, delegate representing the U.S. Virgin Islands, presented never-before-seen video evidence of rioters breaching the Capitol on 6 January.
Note, as the video begins, we are seeing the inside view as the mob approaches from outside and beats the windows and doors. And a lone police officer inside responds and begins to spray the first man who enters, but is quickly overwhelmed. I want you to pay attention to the first group of assailants as they break into the building. The second man through the window is wearing full tactical body armor and is carrying a baseball bat. Others are carrying riot shields.
Just keep remembering that is our Capitol building we're watching. Here with us tonight to talk about it, we're so happy to have Jason Johnson, a campaign veteran, journalist, contributor at the Griot, professor of politics and journalism at Morgan State. We're also happy to have Matthew Dowd, founder of Country Over Party, and in the past, former chief strategist for the Bush-Cheney presidential effort in '04. Gentlemen, good evening to you both. And Matt, a special welcome to you. I'm going to play for you Mark Warner, what he said during an appearance with Nicole Wallace late today.
I pride myself in this job and trying to put myself in the other person's shoes. I'm not proud of trying to be bipartisan. God, I pray that testimony may have some of my Republican colleagues rethink how they're going to vote, rethink who they are and what they're going to stand for.
Matt, do you have any hope that what we saw, what we all witnessed today, has the power to move any Republican votes?
Well, I'm a very hopeful person, unlike my Irish heritage, where the famous Yeats quote of the Irish have an abiding sense of tragedy which sustains them through temporary periods of joy. I have hope, but my realistic outlook is I don't think it's going to move many. It may move a couple. Obviously, Bill Cassidy moved in one way, moved once in one vote. But I don't have an expectation, and I don't think it's because of Donald Trump. I've said this before. I think he's a proxy for the real bigger problem, which is the Republican primary voters, and that's who I think these Republicans are afraid of. They're not afraid of Donald Trump. Nobody is really afraid of Donald Trump. It's the Republican Party primary voters, and that really is, in America today, that segment of the population, and we can have a deeper conversation of why that might be. But that's the problem, and that's what is motivating those Republican senators.
Jason, while I will match Mr. Dowd's Yeats with a Moynihan, the definition of being Irish is knowing sooner or later the world is going to break your heart. Alas, we move on to you, and I have something for you, too. Here is Jim Jordan, whether you like it or not.
The language you talked about, where Democrats last summer, Democrat members of the Congress, said there needs to be more unrest in the streets while there was unrest in the streets, and somehow that's not incitement. But when the president says peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard, they're going to impeach him. I mean, this is what Americans so despise. There's lots of things they hate about this town. They hate when we spend their money on crazy things. But what they mostly hate is the hypocrisy and the double standard that the elite in this town get to have.
So, Jason, what about that sort of whataboutism? And as sound bites go, that was refrigerator magnets. He's got unrest in the streets. He threw the elites in there at the end. But this is Fox News in prime tonight. You saw a lot of flames from BLM protests in the past few months.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Jim Jordan is just like a QAnon Mad Libs. I mean, you know, elites, terrible, lasers from outer space. He's going to do that. He's always been sort of a disingenuous, feckless hack for wherever he thinks the political winds are going. I mean, number one, he's lying because Trump had already been impeached. But two, and I've said this all along about this sort of ridiculous argument, which is I watched a lot of protests last summer. The whole country did. I was at some of the protests last summer. I don't remember anyone saying, we're doing this for Nancy Pelosi. I don't remember anyone saying, we're doing this for Maxine Waters. People protested last year because unarmed black people like Breonna Taylor were shot in their home by cops. So the idea of associating state-sponsored violence with somehow unrest with the fact that the president of the United States tried to have his own vice president killed is a ridiculous and disingenuous comparison. What it speaks to, and this sort of mentions what you said at the beginning, Brian, we have a large number of Republicans. They're not afraid of their primary opponents. They're not afraid of their primary opponents. They agree with the insurrection. They wanted to see it happen. They wanted to be in that number. When the Saints and the Patriots came marching into the building, they wanted to participate. And that's what I think is the dangerous thing that everybody needs to understand. These guys are not being buffeted by some frightening outside force, and in their hearts at home, they're crying at the table saying, gosh, I wish I could get out of this. They are full-fledged engaged in this activity. And I hope that even after this impeachment, that there's a commission and an investigation to how many of them may have been complicit in helping this happen.
And Matt, before we go to a break, do you agree with me that I guess nihilism is uniquely Irish, or at least Irish in part? Do you agree with me that there is a new performative nihilism afoot in the husk, the remnants of the Republican Party?
Well, there's a P.T. Barnum-esque circus-like atmosphere in the tent they've designed that they want to keep only a certain brand of American in. As I listen to Jim Jordan, I'm struck by the fact that every time there seems to be an issue, it says, if we're going to bring up people of color, we're going to bring up people of color, because that's fundamentally, Brian, that's fundamentally what's at the base of why these thousands of Americans stormed the Capitol. It's because they fear a lack of a loss of power and a loss of place in America. And this is a thread that has gone through American history, and you can trace it, but you can trace it all the way back, but trace it fully back to the end of Reconstruction. And it traces all the way through everything we've experienced: the death of Emmett Till, the death of Medgar Evers, the death of Martin Luther King, the death of Heather Heyer, the deaths from police brutality. And every time we come to this, that is the real issue. That's the root of this, is there is a certain segment of the population that fundamentally believes there's real Americans and there's not. And when the real Americans lose their power, they sought, in this instance on January 6th, to nullify election, just like what happened in 1860 and 1861. It's the same thing. They use different words, they have different slogans, but it's exactly the same line that is traced all the way back. They fundamentally do not believe all men and women are created equal in this country.
While sad, that is an accurate viewer's guide to 2021. Both of these gentlemen are going to stay with us. We're just going to sneak in a break. Our conversation continues on the other side. President Joe Biden today continued to counter-program the impeachment by going about the business of running the country. Today, that meant a trip to the Pentagon to talk about things like our relations with China. The Associated Press summing up his strategy this way: for now, the White House's public approach to the proceedings has been impeachment. What impeachment? Remaining with us tonight, Jason Johnson, Matthew Dowd. Jason, what about this strategy of being president of the United States? I noted he didn't trash anyone on Twitter today. I'm not sure that's sustainable. A serious question: how long can he go about kind of ignoring the impeachment elephant right down the street?
I think that Joe Biden can ignore all the elephants and the rest of the GOP. I think it's a smart strategy for him to ignore what's happening. This is Senate business. I know that for many of us, his reaction is sort of like an athlete saying, no, I don't really read fan tweets. We know he's paying attention to the impeachment, but he's got a country to run. There's 400,000 people who have died of COVID. I like the idea that Joe Biden has shown that he can be a responsible president of the United States while the Senate does his business without him trying to put his finger on the scale.
Matthew Dowd, dual question for you. What is the state of play on calling witnesses? What's your prediction? Do you think we will see so much as a single witness?
First, I think the state of play is right now, my sense is they're not going to call them. I think they should call witnesses. I actually think witnesses would give fiber to it and a muscle to the testimony and present it in a way that it's real and not just you're not selling something. You basically have real people saying real things, especially if certain witnesses that could testify, whether they had conversations with Donald Trump or people in the crowd that said, I went there because of Donald Trump, and they stand up and say it as a person. I don't know if they're going to end up in that point. I think the testimony so far has been so powerful, and the defense attorneys for Donald Trump have been so weak. I don't expect them to get stronger. But if I were them, I'd want witnesses right away. And I think what also, and I think, Brian, that's why what you've done on this show tonight, on the other shows, the main point of this is not the punishment of Donald Trump. It's the finding the truth and it's assessing accountability. And I think the punishment is the least important part. I think the American public needs to hear the truth and find out who they should hold accountable. And if only we get that, that's a win, big win for for America at this point in time.
I think the words you just spoke may garner repetition tomorrow, because I think the point you just made is terribly, terribly important as we watch this unfold on television. We saw 1-6 in real time, but we're seeing it the way we didn't see it that day. Jason Johnson, Matthew Dowd, gentlemen, really excited to have you both with us tonight. Thank you very much.